going live. I'd like to call this meeting to order, and I would like to take a motion to go into executive session for the discuss first quarter grievance report, memorandums of agreement with the RHA Paraprofessionals Chapter, Coalition, and ASP Chapter, and update on 2 student matters, and we're adding a discussion of pending litigation concerning board personnel matter. Can I have a motion? Anne Marie, and seconded by Jennifer. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, we are now in executive session.
Are we going to our room?
Yes.
I was like, okay, hair can grow back. Let's look at what other ways we can fund.
I'd like to call this meeting back to order, and I'm going to ask all that are willing and able to please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We'll start with some introductions. Good evening, I'm Diane McBride, the board president, and to my left,
Bill Wright, Superintendent of Schools.
George Day Marteau, attorney for the district.
Good evening, Nikki LaPlaca, board member.
Good evening, Pat McHugh, Assistant Superintendent for Human Resources and School Accountability.
Hi, Andy Whitmore, Assistant Superintendent for Finance and Operations.
Good evening, Nella Naselm, Assistant Superintendent of Student and Family Services.
Hello, Sarah Warren, Student Representative.
Hi, Ariana McKnight, Student Council Representative.
Good evening, May Abdullah, board member.
Good evening, Jennifer Laird, board member.
Hi everyone, Karen Flanagan, School District Clerk.
Hello, Anne-Marie Straczynski, board vice president.
great, thank you. Next is our agenda review, and I do have a change to the agenda, if everybody's agreeable to it. I would like to switch the workshop number 14 with workshop 11, the principal's reopening update. That would help them not have to be here until however long it takes us to get there, and they can get home and rest up for the next days of school.
Kickoff.
All right, so if everybody's agreeable to that, we'll just switch 14 and 11. Great. My understanding, there are some announcements this evening.
Yes, I do have an announcement as we approach School Board Recognition Week, which is going to be next week. I just want to recognize our dedicated members of the Rush-Henrietta Central School District Board of Education. We truly are appreciative for all that you give and all that you do for the kids of Rush-Henrietta. This has been an incredibly difficult year to be a board member, and you've had to make some really, really difficult decisions, but I just want to say how much I respect all of you. You've never run from that responsibility. You always do what's in the best interest of our kids and our community. And I do want to read this somewhat lengthy proclamation from our governor on behalf of the state and also our own district. Whereas each year, School Board Recognition Week is observed by more than 700 school boards in school districts throughout the Empire State. And whereas our state's public education system is designed to meet the educational needs of all children and to empower them to become competent, productive contributors to society and in an ever-changing world. And whereas school boards are currently facing the unprecedented challenges of a pandemic while working closely with educators to prepare our children to learn. And whereas members of local school boards are dedicated to children, learning, and community and devote many hours of service to elementary and secondary public education as they continually strive for improvement, excellence, and progress in education, recognizing that all children can be successful learners, especially when education is tailored to the individual needs of the child. And whereas local school board members are strong advocates for public education and are responsible for communicating the needs of the school district to the public and the public's expectations to the district by working closely with parents, educational professionals, and other community members. And whereas the members of New York State's local school boards respond to the educational needs of the communities they serve and help ensure the solid foundation of our school system. In doing so, these leaders help strengthen our state's educational system and improve future prospects for our children. And whereas during October 19th through October 23rd, 2020, special activities and programs will be held in communities across New York State in observance of School Board Recognition Week, and it is fitting to join in acknowledging the commitment and the contributions of members of local school boards. Now therefore, I, Andrew Cuomo, Governor of the State of New York, do hereby proclaim October 19th through October 23rd, 2020 as School Board Recognition Week in the Empire State. Let's give all of our board members a round of applause for all that they do on behalf of our kids and our community. Truly, thank you from the bottom of our hearts. A very small token of our appreciation.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. It's an honor to work for this community and to work together with each one of you up here. It has been a different year, but we keep our students as our focus.
Absolutely.
This brings us to item 5, a board member report from our student representatives. I have a feeling you're going to split it up tonight. Awesome.
Yes, thank you. Hi, Student Council recently had our first meeting that allowed all students interested to join. We were thrilled to get together, but we struggled incorporating the virtual students due to conflicting class times, causing us to lose a lot of members.
Currently, we are working on an awareness posters to post around the school. These posters are to illuminate the diverse heroes history classes exclude talking about. Council members are really excited to work on our first project of the year and cannot wait for many more.
Our Vice President, Secretary, and Cabinet member met with Dr. Schaefer to discuss lunch outside today. We are planning on starting outdoor lunches next week, and we'll see how it goes in order to determine how we will move forward.
And lastly, the music community at the high school came together and figured out a way for music to continue in students' lives. They equally put an effort forward to make safe masks for all students. Speaking on behalf of all the music students, we are forever grateful for everyone who made music possible to us during this pandemic. That's all for the student report. Thank you.
Thank you. Did you say who made the masks for you?
Huh?
The masks for the students?
Oh, yes. So Mrs. Lamica has been selling masks, and then on top of that, like for band students and singer students, they all put an effort to make specific masks for each, instrument.
I had heard that was happening, but thank you for
Yeah,
letting us know that.
absolutely.
Great. This brings us to item 6. This is the public forum. This is where members of the audience can address the board on items of interest that are not on the agenda. Or if you want to speak to something that is on the agenda, we ask you to please raise your hand while that item is under discussion. And I want to remind the audience that we do have a 3-minute limit, and I'm really going to hold to that this evening as we have a very full and very tight agenda for the evening. So my first person I have a card for is Mr. Mike Kaida. And come to the microphone up here.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me? All right, obviously, Mike Kita, 11 Bracknell Circle, West Henrietta. Obviously, been here the last couple times, give you all an update on where we are with Marcello and the school and such. Appreciate, first of all, receiving the direct call from Superintendent Wright back on September 29th regarding Mark and a request for him to attend 4 days a week. Unfortunately, received the request or the answer that we most expected, that it was turned down. If we have to do it for one, we have to do it for all. I still disagree with that. Obviously, that's why I'm here. It's not one size fits all for a kid like Mark. I think the teachers, the school, themselves are doing as much as they can with what's put in front of them. I'd like to see, obviously that survey just came out and I filled it out, and it's probably quite obvious who filled my responses out, right? I think more should be done and could be done on Wednesdays for the virtual learners, or especially kids like Mark. He gets 30 minutes with Mrs. Schwartz. What's the rest of the day going on Wednesday, right? How did every day become a professional day every week? I see other districts are doing more on those non-virtual days, and there needs to be some level of instruction on that off day. They're not teaching anybody. They're, I get it on the other days, right? The best practice kind of concern. Well, the best practice for one doesn't always fit the other, right? What's the best practice for Mark and kids like him is getting them the most in-person instruction possible. And I just don't see that in terms of being done so far, and we're back to kind of the wait-and-see approach and trying to find that middle ground of a schedule from the Remote Learning Academy to the hybrid programs, right? Obviously, the 5 hours of ASD or autism support time for the year, that's in the works and forthcoming, so that's a start. And maybe the survey's a start, too, to get some ideas and some feedback from others other than myself. Obviously, you can see I might be the only one speaking about it and the only one probably coming to speak about it. Obviously, we're doing as much as we can outside with the outside support, and without more time passing through, we'd definitely like to see more from the district side. And it's also clear that it's okay to maybe acknowledge that you might not have a plan yet, but it's at least worth to have a discussion about it, and we'll obviously continue to still be here to do that and push that objective and voice our concerns. That's really it. Obviously, more time. We try to be proactive about that and not let more time pass through the semester or the quarter. And, it's okay to acknowledge it, but at least let's have the discussion to move something and get something in place, or more instruction in place. And I think at least that beginning part, if not in school, is that Wednesday to deal with, to get them more time there, with the teachers or with support for those days, as it's open for everyone. And I could see the various schedules of what our second grader gets to the fourth grader to the 10th grader, and it seems like it's varied, or maybe it's up to the teachers. I don't know in terms of the time frame, their direction, or whatever the point of what they're supposed to do or able to do, or what else they might have on their schedule other than instructing the kids that day. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Are there any other members of the audience that wish to address the board at this time? All right, seeing none, we will move on then to our consent agenda items for routine matters. I'll take a motion to accept. Jennifer, Anne Marie, second. Any questions, discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. This brings us to personnel actions. It's item 8. I'll take a motion to approve. May. Nikki is the second. Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. This brings us to item 9, memorandums of agreement. I will take them one at a time. I have Nikki is for 9A as the motion, second by Anne Marie. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. 9B is action pertaining to the approval of the MOA with the RHAA Coalition regarding adjustments to unpaid leave of absence. I'll take a motion. Jennifer, second by May. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. 9C is the action approving the MOA with the ASP chapter regarding adjustments to their work week or work year. Nikki makes the motion, a second by Anne Marie. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. This brings us to item 10, our action pertaining to the settlement of a pending administrative proceeding alleging employment discrimination. I'll take a motion. Anne Marie, second by May. Any discussion? All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. This brings us to our flip-flop schedule. We will now take our workshop for the principal's reopening update. I can see Mr. Greg Lane is coming forward, Ms. Jen Tomelty, and Dr. Tim Schaefer are on their way up.
Mr. Lane says they can talk right over me. Good evening, everyone. I'm Jen Tomelty, and I'm the principal of Vollmer Elementary School. And we're here this evening to talk with you a little bit about the reopening of our schools.
I can't hear you, I'm sorry.
Did he turn it off? Good evening, everyone. I'm Jen Tomelty, and I'm the principal of Vollmer Elementary School. We're here to talk with you a little bit about the reopening of our schools and the process we've been on since August, really, to get our buildings ready and prepared in accordance with all of the safety guidelines that we were given and get our kids back to school in the beginning of September. With me this evening are Dr. Schaefer and Mr. Lane, and they're going to be adding a little bit about their experiences also.
Jen, we can't hear you.
Yeah, I don't think she has her big booming voice with her tonight. So what we wanted to do, this is too low for me, is we'll just go, how about that, right? Is talk a little bit about the preparation we took to make sure that when our kids did return to school, they felt safe, our staff felt safe and comfortable. We were then respectful of all the guidelines. And then in addition, what we wanted to do to prepare our staff for what was going to be a very different kind of opening of schools in the hybrid model with smaller class sizes, but also how to best prepare for the hybrid learning and promote real learning that occurs outside of the school day for our students, and how can we purposely plan and instruct those types of things. And you guys can't see our slide presentation, can you? Can they? They have it there?
We have it on.
So as you can see, as we kind of go through there, Andy Whitmore's office and the custodial and buildings and grounds crews just did a fantastic job. It was unbelievable. You've been in our buildings. Every 3 feet of every room, there is a sticker to remind students about their 6-foot barriers. And it just was an incredible team effort, and they did a lot of nice things for us. They've installed thermal cameras for us so we can monitor temperatures of students and, more importantly, visitors who may enter our building to make sure that they're not coming in with a fever. Our custodial crews cleaned out all the classrooms, and so we have lots of storage, lots of school items in storage, as I can see some over in the wings of the stage here, that we have done to accommodate no more than 14 to 18 desks in a room, and at Berger we don't have any more than 15 in one class, and that's in a chorus room. So as you can see through the slides, we're really focused about that. I think the remarkable thing is there was a lot of talk about students and mask breaks and how they were going to respond to having to wear a mask. They've done phenomenally with it. It's they care about their safety and the safety of others, and I think that's universal across all the schools in the district. No, there hasn't been one student that has refused to wear a mask or said that they didn't feel comfortable wearing a mask in school, and so it's been a real sense of comfort for everybody that we're taking care of each other. And we generally believe that if we continue to practice safe distance and we continue to wear our mask where appropriate, then we'll continue to attend school all year long. That is our #1 goal and priority, is to have our kids with us for all 180 days of instruction this year.
So the other piece that I would add is some of the safety procedures. So if you look in the cafeteria when you walked by, the Lexon shields that we have there, they provide two things really. So they create that safe barrier so that students have a place to eat. But because we're able to use those, students are actually able to be a little closer together. So they can actually have some of the socialization and the conversations that are so necessary in school. That is one of the things that is difficult with social distancing and masking, is to still have that opportunity to have the social piece of school. There's a lot of learning there that happens between students when they have that opportunity. And so the work that was done to create a safe space for our students to have that in the building was so important. In addition to that, we're going to talk a little bit about the professional development that was done as well. When you really think so, for having those days at the beginning of the school year to focus on blended learning, so really understanding what that is, and then the instructional technology. So what were those pieces that are out there that are the tools that help us to really inform that instruction that's happening for the students? And then also the social emotional learning, so the mental wellness, and making sure that we're creating an environment that sets that foundation for our students to be able to access the instruction. And that really was crucial to having those days, those professional development days at the beginning of the school year, to really have that purposeful planning of instruction that set up the classrooms for success. And I don't know if you guys wanted to just add anything to that?
I think our teachers have all been very receptive to the amount of professional development that they've received and very appreciative of it. I do think having those extra pre-planning days allowed them to go into the school year feeling much more comfortable and ready to teach their kids in this new hybrid setting.
And I would also add that I think we're entering our 6th week, and we're getting better at it. It was new and it was different, and I think as a staff, our teachers have been responsive to parents when they've reached out to us. They've been responsive to each other and how we can use some of the tools that are at our disposal to make learning happen for students when they're with us, but also when they're not with us. We have a lot of learning to go. I think it's a great opportunity for us to model what it means to be lifelong learners as we're learning to develop new systems, new interventions, pretty much reinventing a school system to meet the needs of a hybrid program. And then also being very mindful of the students who aren't with us at the Remote Learning Academy to make sure that we're monitoring their progress, their attendance, and their ability to be successful across the board. So we do have a lot of work to do, but I feel like all of our teachers have rolled up their sleeves, and we are working hard at it, and we appreciate your support. And I think it's really been a really good opening of schools, considering all the variables and where it could have gone. Anybody else?
So I would say the other piece that I guess we're very proud of, the start of the school year brought a lot of changes quickly. So changes to teaching assignments, changes to schedules, and our students, our families, our faculty really were able to take those changes, work with them so that we could have the course offerings that really supported students both in our Remote Learning Academy and in our hybrid model, which really was our goal, was to make sure that students were able to have the best possible instruction that we could offer. And so that I was really proud of the way our students worked with that and the way our faculty worked with those changes to make sure we were ready for students.
Overall, I think it's just been a joy to have kids back in our buildings, and our teachers are loving seeing them every day. The kids look pretty happy to be there, and we are planning to ride this out for the next 180 days and make it a good year for everyone. Do you have any questions for us?
I do. Any students feel they need a mask break that either don't know how to ask for or any issues surrounding that? Have there been any issues?
I am not aware of any situations where they have. We have allowed mask breaks to happen in the discretion of the teacher in the classroom as long as they're 6 feet apart and seated. And to my knowledge, that's worked well enough to this point.
And I would certainly echo that at the elementary school. I'm not aware of any problems at this point with mask breaks. I think the teachers have worked hard to understand when that might be appropriate and worked hard to give kids the opportunity to have their masks off from time to time.
So I agree with what everyone has said. So what I've witnessed in the classroom is opportunities if students choose to take those mask breaks when they are in a safe distance. And then when it's time to pull them back up, they do. So I guess one of the things I'd like to emphasize is how great our students are with this. I mean, they really have been wonderful. They take it seriously. You know, we're not perfect, so there will be times when masks will slide under the nose, but honestly, the visual cue just to pull up is often all it takes. So I'm really, really proud of the way our students have conducted themselves, the respect they've shown each other, the respect they've shown the community. They really have done an incredible job of rising to a very difficult situation.
We're probably more resilient than us adults.
Typically.
Anybody else have questions for them?
I have a question. How's like lunch and breakfast going? Because we used to see lines as the grab and go. Is that working well for the students?
It's really going very nicely. Number one, we have many fewer students in the building on any given day, so that definitely reduces the number of kids. And then we've also spread our arrivals over a longer period of time at the elementary schools. And so there really aren't any big long lines for breakfast. And then at lunch, I know that we've expanded the time in between classes, so the classes are well able to get through the lines without any backup and buildup of classes. So that's gone very nicely.
There have been no issues with lunch. The only issue I would have is that the food is free, and I wish more of our students were taking advantage of that, especially our breakfast program. We have seen numbers really drop in our free breakfast. It's eligible to all folks. Not sure why kids aren't interested in eating this year. We were hoping it would kind of correct itself over the first month, but it hasn't up until this point. And so if we can encourage our kids to grab a breakfast, that would be great.
So that is the biggest thing that we see at the senior high school as well, is there's been really reduced numbers of students taking part with our breakfast program. But we are not seeing the typical lines that you would have on any given day.
One more question. Just one more. How are the students when they're not in school? How are they with turning in their asynchronous assignments? Are teachers saying like that they're coming in a timely manner, or is it? How are they responding to those types of assignments that are given?
We have students that are doing an incredible job, and we have some students who are struggling with it. So, you know, that is one of the pieces that we really do concentrate on and that we're focused on, is how do we help some of those students who have some executive function struggles. So having that asynchronous time where they're trying to organize and prioritize work, what are those interventions that we can do to help them to increase that level of work that's coming in through the asynchronous piece. In many ways, you find some similar aspects of this. We had students who struggled turning in assignments prior to the pandemic. So we still do have that situation. Now we need to be, I would say we need to find some different interventions because we have fewer in-person opportunities to provide interventions, so they're going to look a little different as we're working to help students gain some of those independent skills that they need in order to function in an asynchronous environment, but then also those are the skills they need when they walk out of our K-12 institution. You know, They need to be able to have those executive function skills that help them prioritize and work through this. So this is also a great opportunity.
Yes.
So, when you talk about devising new systems, or the systems we're monitoring, we used to monitor for academic progress, or we're monitoring for academic progress, also for engagement, how many times we're hearing from kids how they, and the great thing about the highlight program is when we're not engaging at home, we know they're coming back to us in a day or two, and we can have that opportunity to have some sort of face-to-face intervention of how we can get out of that. But I think, one of the things that we absolutely have to impress upon junior high level with our kids is that they have a responsibility at home to spend a chunk of time each day really focused on their studies. And we've been, like, one of the feedback was a lot of kids are spending a lot of time on their work, so we've asked our teachers to put modifiers. This should take 15 to 20 minutes. So parents at home know what's a reasonable amount of time their students should be working on that. So we're learning as we're going, but we're monitoring that engagement. And if kids aren't engaging, we're going to be reaching out sooner than we did this spring, because we have 100 days to go.
Mr. Lane, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I think because you're not using the mic, it's not going through the live stream. I apologize.
And how about that? I'm done. But so, sorry. So we're developing those new processes so that we can monitor that engagement and we can respond accordingly.
And I would agree, getting to see our kids every few days definitely is more helpful with getting the work completed. But just like they're doing in the high school and the junior high school, at the elementary level, we're also developing new ways to monitor how students are doing with completing that work and reaching out to them in different ways.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for our
I don't
wonderful
have a question. I just want to say thank you to all of you and your staff for a great opening. I've heard such wonderful things about students being back in the classroom and how everyone has pitched in, no matter where it is or what it is. Everyone is doing more than their part. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your evening. All right. Really, I should have said earlier that 14 was going to become 11, and we're just going to bump down, 11 becomes 12. That's really what I meant earlier. So we're going to go ahead to our workshop on budget development.
Okay. So I'm going to give a brief overview and sort of set the table, and then I'm going to spin things to Andy, and he's going to give you the more detailed information. So our budgeting goals have not changed. We still focus our efforts around developing a budget that is, one, educationally sound, meaning that we allow ourselves the capacity to maintain and also build upon the programs that we have in place so that we can continue to improve and develop and get better year after year. We also want to make sure that we give ourselves enough wiggle room where we can respond to the bumps in enrollment that we see on certain grade levels in certain buildings each and every year, so that we can ensure that our class sizes stay at a reasonable level. And we also want to make sure that we are in a position where our resourcing can still support the district priorities that we identify every year as being most important. So as you know, our priorities this year are centered around equity and inclusion, mental wellness, instruction, and improvement in the area of special education. So we want to make sure that our budget can support that. We want to make sure that our budget is equitable, meaning that buildings, if you just want to put it really simply, get what they need. And if you look across all 9 buildings, there are different flavors in each building. There are different needs. different levels of performance, different strengths, and we want to make sure that as we're resourcing buildings, that we take that into consideration. And also, I think it's important to point out, this was the first year that we did state transparency reporting for our budget, and so it was nice to see that, you know, equity was one of our budgeting principles, and now it's essentially a requirement at the state level, and as we work through the process, Andy will be talking more about that. And then lastly, we want to make sure that our budget is fiscally responsible, and there are a couple areas that we focus on there. We want to make sure that, one, the budget-to-budget increase is reasonable, and that, you know, as we are rolling our budgets over year, that we're essentially controlling costs. But then lastly, we want to make sure we do not want to burden taxpayers. And so we want to make sure that our increases stay within the confines of the tax levy cap. This is going to be a unique year for us. I don't want to paint this as a doomsday scenario, but I will say, I mean, all of you are well-studied and well-read, and so you know what is at stake in this financial cycle. You know what's being talked about at the state level, a potential 20% reduction in aid, and in the event that happens, we, you know, could lose potentially up to $10 million in aid, which would be extremely difficult for us. In the event that we get some help from federal funding, that number could be potentially much lower. So the word that I would use to describe this budget cycle is simply uncertain. Okay, at this stage, we just aren't really sure at this point what we're going to be working with. I think there are some misconceptions out there due to the pandemic, that because, you know, our students are on a hybrid schedule or some are being instructed remotely, that it is costing less, when in fact this year is actually costing us more, because our buildings are still open, our teachers and staff members are still on payroll, and even though kids are learning in different modalities, they're still learning, and that requires resources and it requires teaching. We've spent a lot of money in terms of extra disinfecting and cleaning. We've spent over $1.5 million on PPE, and because we have so many students in the remote learning model, we've had to shift a lot of resources in there, especially in infrastructure and technology. We've also shifted a lot over there in the way of personnel. So we need to consider those things as we enter into the budget conversation and begin to think about what we need to consider for next year. Some other principles which I think are really important. Soon we'll be, in the coming weeks, we'll be discussing the program and service reviews with you. Know that the program and service reviews are based on a rollover budget, and at least initially don't consider the additional costs associated with the pandemic. As I said before, there are certain accommodations that we've made for families, certain programs and protocols that we've put in place this year because we're going through a pandemic, but we're not sure what the long-lasting impact will be around some of those things. One example is the Remote Learning Academy. That may not go away after this year. And so as we're having budget conversations for 2021, we'll have to take some of those things into consideration about how we're going to resource for next year. You know how the process works, so usually week to week, month to month, as we progress toward winter, we have a better understanding of what the budget picture is going to look like, and as we do that, we will be proposing ways that we may be able to best utilize resources and realize efficiencies. I'll spare you the suspense. Regardless of where the gap ends up, The strategy will probably be similar to what we've proposed in past years, where we are blending our use of fund balance and reserves with measured strategic efficiencies or reductions. You know, I know we've talked about it throughout the fall, but I can't stress enough, and I think it probably will come up when Tom is here later and we begin to talk about the external audit. But it is really important every year that we budget conservatively and that we continue to build and develop our reserves, because what that allows us to do and what it will allow us to do during difficult budget years, which again, I'll spare you the suspense. I think that that's on the horizon, but it puts us in a position where we have reserves that we can use to offset the gap, where we don't have to be in a position where we have to suggest draconian cuts. And, you know, I give you a lot of credit because you all made some hard decisions at the end of the year last year, preemptively, so that we'll be in a position where we won't have to make mid-year cuts. I think you will see some districts in a position where they will have to do that mid-year. We won't do that, and we don't have to do that because you already have made some difficult decisions regarding reductions coming into this year, anticipating that we would be losing revenue. And then, you know, I also just want to reiterate that at the end of the day, this is a situation that's difficult for everybody, including the families that we serve. We know that there are a number of our families where parents have lost jobs or have had wages reduced, and so that's something that we need to take into consideration when we are looking at what we're proposing and the impact to the tax rate. So that's sort of the general overview and the gist. Like I said, I don't want to paint this as a doomsday scenario because we don't know what's in front of us yet. But certainly we are prepared for whatever comes, and that's sort of the landscape as we enter into the conversation. So I'm going to turn things over to Andy. He's going to get into some more detailed information around the budget.
All right, thank you. Just a couple of notes. The superintendent mentioned our potential exposure if the 20% state aid is 10 million. That is higher than what we had projected early in the year. We had told you around 7.5 million. There's two things that have increased that. The first and the biggest one is we, right now, STAR is not off the table. When we gave you that 7.5 million, it was based upon this year's state aid that we were entitled to. What we're being told is there's no decision whether or not STAR will be subject to that 20%. We receive over $7 million in money from the state for the STAR credit that the state has funded for years and years. And that's almost $1.5 million exposure to us. And then the other thing that they hit us with is the prior year. Every fiscal year, we go out the year with the state owing us some money for the prior year. They've already taken $600,000 away from us from the prior year that we weren't, at the time, we weren't aware would hit us. So those are the two biggest things that have increased our potential exposure up to $10 million. But on the other hand, as the superintendent mentioned, there still is a very good chance, even though it keeps dragging on, that the federal government will provide some significant stimulus. So we don't want to come in and develop a plan next year with $10 million worth of cuts if they aren't going to be happening, because that really impacts students and staff severely. But we do need to be prepared. So what we're going to do is develop, as the superintendent said, a normal rollover budget to support all the programs and services that we typically do if we go back to a normal year, and then we'll tweak it. Do we need some additional supports if we maintain remote learning and things like that? And then as information unfolds, we'll develop some of the cuts. But because of the reductions you guys took at the end of the last budget year and the way you allocated some of the reserves, even if we were to lose up to the 10 million this year, we could still make it through the year without cutting students and staff, which is, as the superintendent said, is critical, and that would give us time to react. So what we did, the next page is our 5-year forecast, and this is based upon budget as usual. As you know, once the tax cap was implemented, that threw us, as well as most school districts, into what we call a structural deficit, because the more you rely on property taxes, and our district relies about 2/3 of our funding is property taxes, you are capped at that 2% cap. It's sort of counterintuitive, but the needier districts that rely more on state aid, under the tax cap, they've done much better because state aid is growing anywhere 3 to 5% a year, whereas those relying on property taxes have grown roughly 2% a year. We know the tax cap isn't exactly 2%, but that's a rough approximation. So if you look at our 5-year financial plan, we are in the same predicament that we've been in for a number of years, that we do have a structural deficit because our contractual cost, our benefits cost, and the cost to support our students are growing at faster than 2% a year. So when you look at it, if you look at the revenues, the next year and the year after, we'll probably still get some growth factor for the new RG&E site. We actually got a big chunk of that in this year's tax levy cap. That should continue for a couple more years, and then that goes away. So that's how we got up to 3% growth in the real property tax items. But then further out, the growth will taper off a bit. So if you look at our revenue, for next year, this is a rough estimate. We have not done a detailed bottoms up yet. That's what we're in the process of doing. Our revenue will be in the $137 million range. Our expenses, growing at our contractual rates, will be in the $130 million range. So that gives us about a $2.1 million gap, and that's what we call our structural deficit. If we do nothing to close that, the next year it grows to 3.1 million. The year after that, 4.9 million, and up to the 5th year, we're up to almost an $8 million gap. But as you know, we never ignore that gap. Every year, the district, the board takes actions to try and close that gap. So this is worst case, but it shows if we don't take actions, how bad it could be. And down below at the bottom is the potential headcount impact. So next year, if we did nothing to close the gap, we would have to reduce the equivalent of 22 teaching positions, 15 non-teaching positions for 36. The next year, that grows to 53. But if you look at it, that because it's a cumulative number, it's not an additional 53, it's 17 more. But the reality is it probably won't be that bad because we'll take actions, we'll utilize reserves that we have to close it, but we will have to take actions. And really that's the bottom line message from this slide. We continue to be in a structural deficit, so we will have to take budget actions and look at some of the programs and services we offer. Are the ways to offer them more efficiently? Has time transition the need for some of them? These are the things we look at every year. So if you looked at that budget gap and then flip the page, how could we close it? One way is reserve utilization. The board has been very strategic in setting up, establishing reserves, and how could we use it. We could go the next 2 years if we made no cuts or no adjustments and live on our reserves, but you could see by fiscal year ending 2024, we'd have $1.5 million, that's the red or the number in parentheses, a gap in our reserve shortfall, and that gap grows to the end of the 5 years up to over $7 million. But what our reserves do, they give us time to allow us to make adjustments without having to make draconian adjustments, as the superintendent said. They can be more thoughtful and adjust things in a much more planned way. So really, that's the 5-year financial outlook. Once we develop the rollover program and service review, then we'll come up with contingencies if state aid is reduced significantly. We're hoping it won't come to that, probably sometime after the election, or if not, early in the next year. We should get news from the federal government. They'll come to some sort of stimulus plan agreement, and the worst case will probably be much less than what we're facing now, but you never know for sure. I mean, last July, I thought by now, or last spring, I thought by now we would have had that stimulus bill. It's still not here, so there's definitely a risk, but there's still a pretty good chance. So any questions on our budget process and what we're looking at? All right, I'm going to just then transition into the reserve plan. And I'm not going to go through it in detail. The document that we gave you is similar to prior years, but it details the purpose of each reserve and funding levels. So if you go to the page that says summarize balance sheet at the top, it'll show you that at the end of last year, we did have some good news. Because of the close down, we did avert a number of expenses. Our buses weren't running, our utility bills were a lot lower. We did not have the substitute teacher expense that we typically have throughout the year. So we did have leftover funds at the end of the year, and the board made a number of strategic decisions on what to do with it. The first one was the unemployment reserve. If you remember a few years ago, this used to be at the $3 million level, and the state controller came in and said, well, you don't use $3 million, you're way overfunded. And they were right in the sense that typically we pay less than $50,000 a year in unemployment costs, but just the last quarter alone, our bill was about $120,000. The whole reason you have large reserves is for the unusual, unexpected events like now. 12 years ago, we had the recession of 2007. You know, the controller ignores the fact. So we did respond to the audit. We reduced the reserve, but last year, at the end of the year, we beefed it back up a bit. So our unemployment insurance reserve is at $500,000. That grew a bit. Our retirement reserve, which is for non-certified teachers, we added $780,000 to that to bring it over to $5 million. And our typical costs run about $2.2, $2.3 million for those pension costs. So that gives us at least a 2-year buffer if we used it in its entirety. And we were just able to, a couple years ago, establish the TRS retirement reserve for our certified staff. So we're only at $1.6 million, but that was an $800,000 growth. Now that's the one we typically spend $4.5 to $5 million a year, so there's not a high level of coverage, but it's certainly a reserve we can access quickly if we need to, because the thing with reserves, you can only utilize them for what they were designated for. And so the board has been strategic in identifying different areas where we would need reserves. So to access them, we have to spend them on the things they were identified for. And then the other big area was capital reserves, and that's a combination of our building reserves and our bus reserves. We did put $6.7 million in those in year end, but that's a big thing that'll enable us in this year's budget. Every year we take our building aid and our bus purchase aid and reinvest it for the next year. Basically, the board pre-funded it at the end of last year, so if our state aid gets cut, we can cut about $6 million of expenses without touching a person or a program because those expenses were pre-funded. So that's why you have reserves. You strategically plan and utilize them, and in these uncertain times, it has set us up in a great position. And then the last few, encumbrances are really not a reserve that you can use. They're basically commitments we made to spend money in that year, but it wasn't spent, so you carry it over to the next year. And that's done through purchase orders. So we have a legal obligation to pay for that, but we didn't receive the service or good yet. And you can see it grew quite a bit, and that's really a reflection because schools were closed for the spring, and we didn't allow office staff back in until June, and that's when they hurried up and made a bunch of purchases for the following school year, and a lot of those things didn't come in until over the summer, so at June 30th, it was an encumbrance, a commitment, and that's how that grew. Our designated fund balance is basically money left over that we did not spend the prior year, and we grew that a couple $100,000, so that helps us balance our budget because revenues and expenses have to equal, and so we don't need to tax as much by using that leftover money. The problem is if you spend it, if you can't carry it over, then you've got to make it up. So we've been very good. For a number of years, we've carried over that same money year over year because we budget conservatively. But if the worst case happened and we had to use this money, that would set us up in a deficit the following year, but at least we'd make it through the current year. And then the undesignated fund balance is the same thing. We carry that $5 million over year, but we use it for cash flow purposes over the summer. Our property taxes don't start coming in till the end of September, so we go from July through most of September with very little money coming in, and that's why we use this for our cash flow. So that was a long-winded summary, but any questions? I'm not going to go through the rest of the plan. Did you have any questions about it as you read through it? All right. I think you have to do a motion to.
We will, yeah. I always love looking at these because it reminds me of what those different reserves are specifically for and where we're at and what our plan is. It's really focuses things, so. All right, so that brings us to the acceptance of the 2020-21 reserve plan. I'll take a motion to accept that. Anne Marie, Jennifer is a second. Any other questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Thank you very much.
All right, then the last financial item we have tonight is we have Mr. Tom Zuber here. He's from the Mangel Metzger Bar firm who does our annual audit. So every year he and his firm come in and perform an audit. They review our controls to make sure we have adequate internal controls because there is a significant amount of money flowing through the school district, and also to ensure that our year-end balances are proper. So is the money that's left over really left over and available to be put in the reserves and our statements stated properly. So Tom, if you wouldn't mind coming up to the microphone there and give the board a little bit overview of how our year-end audit went.
Thank you, Andy. Can you hear me okay? No?
Might be on tap it. You just have to hold it closer.
Jeff, can you hear me now?
It's real close.
It sounds like it's working?
Oh, there you go.
All right. Well, thank you, Andy, for that introduction. As Andy mentioned, I'm one of the partners with Mangel Metzger Bar, the Ray Wagger CPAs. Some of you may be familiar with that. It's kind of interesting. One of the areas that I was going to discuss was the importance of the reserve discussion that you folks just went through, and so that is really fantastic from the audit side of it. What I was just going to highlight was your June 30th, 2020 basic financial statements. We met with the audit committee back in September 25th, And we reviewed that document, and that document's roughly 63 pages long. And we had a very good discussion. We talked about year-over-year variances. We talked about budget variances. We talked about fund balance, reserves. We talked about internal controls, checks, and balances. So we had a very nice discussion. We also talked about the challenges that you folks will face in all school districts in New York State. And I know tonight you were talking about one of the biggest challenges, the uncertainty in state aid and what will happen going forward and whether or not there will be any subsidies from the federal government. So those uncertainties. You've got obviously the property tax cap, another big challenge for you folks in terms of trying to deal with the challenges. You've got pension costs and the potential increases to the potential costs, which are significant portions of your budget. And as you know, those are areas where the state identifies a rate and you have to pay what the state says. And you know, the part of the financial condition and looking at the financial condition really starts with those reserves and fund balances. And again, the district has done a very good job over the past few years in developing those reserves and fund balance. So again, the district continues to be in good financial condition. And I mentioned that the pension cost is part of your review and discussion of the different reserves that you have. You've got some operating type reserves that really relate to things like your pension systems. Again, you mentioned you've got an employee retirement contribution reserve. You have a teacher's retirement contribution reserve. Two reserves that are extremely beneficial that will help you deal with the future potential increases to those costs. So you'll be able to utilize some of those reserves to help offset those costs. So again, very positive in the long-term financial planning. You know, Andy mentioned a couple of the other operating reserves, unemployment, you've got a workers' compensation reserve, all very important in the long-term look. And you know, the district has always done a very good job in communicating and talking about the reserves, just like you just reviewed a few minutes ago. So again, very positive. A couple of the other key reserves, and I think Andy alluded to that as well, your capital reserves. The district does have several different capital reserves relating to your building type capital reserves, bus reserves, and again, very important for the long-term capital planning of the school district. Those reserves, they really can help offset the local portion of a project, which really is beneficial to reduce the tax impact on those projects. So again, very, very positive. And I think Andy said, you know, at the end of the year, the district did make some decisions to allocate some of the excess funds that you developed this year through some of the different savings to allocate into those reserves, both the capital reserve, teachers retirement, employee retirement reserve. So you're actively using some of those reserves. You used about $300,000 as part of the budget process, and then you were able to refund those reserves. So very positive from a long-term financial standpoint. Andy mentioned you're also appropriating fund balance. So you're supporting your budget with appropriated fund balance, roughly about $3 million. Again, for a district this size, that's very reasonable. As Andy mentioned, you know, going from one year to the next, just to break even, you have to develop budgetary surpluses equal to that. And if you don't, that's when your fund balances begin to erode. So again, you've done a very good job as it relates to those long-term planning pieces. Okay. So again, we did spend quite a bit of time with the audit committee, had a very nice discussion with the financial statements, and I'm pleased to report we issued an unqualified opinion. That's the opinion you're looking for. That's the financial statements are fairly stated. That's really what you're looking for. There were no material weaknesses or significant deficiencies. So again, very positive from the financial statement standpoint. You know, Andy mentioned the internal controls, checks and balances. That's part of our audit process. We sit down and we have to document all of the different processes and procedures you have over the financial cycle. And again, No material weaknesses or significant deficiencies, but a few minor procedural items just to enhance the checks and balances you have. So overall, very, very positive report. Anybody have any questions?
Anybody have questions for Tom? Okay, then I guess we will move to the action to accept those reports. The external basic financial statements for year ended June 30th, 2020, the letter of communication, and the communicating internal control related matters is identified in the audit for the year ended of June 30th, 2020. I'll take a motion for that. For Nikki, and a second by May. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. This also brings us to the action pertaining to the corrective action plan for the year end, which really is just a basic statement of what we'll need to do in the future. So I will take a motion to accept that. Nikki, a second by Anne Marie. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Yes. Thanks so much, Mr. Zuber. All right. This brings us to one of our favorite things. Is we have our biannual policy review. Now, I'm going to say to our students, we have like 85 policies that we're going to be reviewing. You are more than welcome to stay and hear what we do. If you feel that you need to leave, we understand. All right? Thanks. So, before we get started with it, Anne Marie sent in some of the spacing, that kind of thing. We saw a few from George. We're going to just skip over any of those during this part. If anybody finds any others, then we can forward those to Karen for attention. We'll take these policy by policy, and then, raise your hand if there's something that you need to bring up. And I know George sent us a few comments, and we'll attend to those as well. So our first one, we're into the student policies. It's 5310. All right, Pat?
Nerlon has a few minor changes, wording changes. In the first paragraph, the second sentence, where it says the school administration, we'd like to change it to the school district and school administrators shall develop.
So district and administrators.
Correct.
Okay.
School and district administrators.
Okay. Anything else on that one? All right. I don't see the need for that for a second read or anything else. Okay. 5310.1. Yep.
First sentence, suggesting that we change children to students.
Anything else on that one?
I do have a question with the, I don't know if anything's ever been decided between Monroe County School Boards or NYSBA about the his, her. I'll ask it now rather than going through every single one where it is.
I knew that somebody would bring that up because I know that that's been discussed as a board. And I put it out there for consideration and commentary, that as we work through if it was the want of the board to do away with the his and hers, him and hers, that what you could do is to either substitute the student in those places, or to, on these policies where it will say, for example, it shall be the right of each district student, change that to plural, and then use their. That would be my suggestion, is you as you move through these policies.
So what does anybody think about that?
I'm okay with either, I just would like something done, so.
Okay. Anybody down there have any thoughts? To using the student, or doing the plural students and then using their versus the his, her?
That would be fine.
The students
The students and their.
and their? You good with that?
That works.
Student, are you
Thank
good with
you.
that?
That's gonna be a lot of changes, and I apologize, but.
But
Yeah, Nerlanda pointed out quite a few of those as well, where we could change it to there.
we make a decision, and then as we go along, those can be made, and then, yes, it's gonna be a lot, but,
So
All right.
there is one in that,
Yes, sir.
5310.1.
yeah. So we'll make those changes. They wouldn't need a second read on that.
They would or they wouldn't?
They will not.
No, okay.
So those will be minors.
Those are minors when if you're just changing it to,
Yeah, it
like
is,
that.
it is a
Yeah.
board goal.
No change of meaning, it's just a,
Yeah, exactly.
It is a board goal to try to address bias in the policies.
Right, yeah. So that'll be a step in that direction for sure.
So going forward, do you want us to point them all out, or just going to be you do? Do you want me to just give you my paperwork afterwards, rather than,
It's fine, it's gonna take a while between those and all the other changes.
right, so I'll just give you all of mine.
Okay.
So in the future, as we go through these, as we have a policy review like this, you can forward those on, and we won't have to do that right at this meeting.
Okay.
All right, perfect. Thank you. All right, is that it for 5310.1? All right. We'll go to 5311. Let's see.
I do have a couple things.
Okay.
There's several inconsistencies where it says parents/guardians, but then there's other places that just say parents. So I think we need to be consistent. In most of the places it says parents/guardians, but there are a few that are left that just say parents.
So they all need to be parent/guardian. All right.
1, 2.
Anything else on that one?
No, there were just 7 of them in
Okay.
that one.
now, I sent a number of changes, I figured they're already incorporated without bringing them up again, right?
Yep. That spacing, or there were some typos you sent.
So Karen has George's changes?
Yes, he emailed them.
All right. 5311.1. I think this, I'm not sure if it was George that sent it, to add the will investigate, will conduct. Is that you, George? 5311, to change the tense on that one. Change it from present to future, and in
Well, it's just in
the,
a couple of places, it's like every so often there's a sentence that reads in the present
Yep.
and everything else is written in the future, that's.
so everybody saw that? Everybody's good? All right.
Before you move on with the second bullet, instead of an opportunity for the accused student to tell their story, I would say to present their version of the event.
All right. I don't think that changes the meaning, it just articulates it a little better, so no second read on that.
To keep consistent with the.
Everybody's good with that? All right.
So Diane, on this, like, I'm gonna go through, change the his and her, change the tense, change Nerlon stuff, and it's not gonna come back for a second read, it's just a minor.
It's my, yeah, it's
Okay.
not changing the meaning, it's,
Okay.
all right. Brings us, the exhibit 5311.1-E.1, any changes on that? Okay. I don't know why on the next one, 5311.1-E.2, I wrote something, I made a line under the word statement, but I have no clue why I did that, so doesn't make any sense, so on to the next one. 5311.3.
Nurlan suggested we might, again, change the administration to the building administrators. And
Where is that? I'm sorry.
it's in this, I'm sorry, the second paragraph, second line, to bring the building administrators' items of concern. And then change the second administration to them.
Okay. Everyone good with that? Okay. 5311.3-R. Okay. 5311.4. 5311.5.
There is another parent in that one. Under student jewelry worn in physical education class, fifth line down, it just says finally the signed parent request at the very end of that sentence, at the end of that line, needs to be.
Nikki, I can't hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
The fifth line down under student jewelry worn in physical education class, it says signed parent request, so it should say parent/guardian request.
Okay. Anything else on that one? 5311.5-E.
First sentence, again, it's parents, it should be parents/guardians.
All right. 5311.6.
Couple of things on this one. George raised a point about the number 5 under Article 2 with regard to shared decision-making committee. In the last biennial review, we changed all the rules around that. So I think this ought to go to policy. 5 ought to be rewritten to reflect the current practice. We've never used the SDM committee as a place to have kids come and want to change school rules. That's just not the purpose of that. They should probably go to the school improvement team so we can make those changes, propose those to the board. And then Nurlan asked if George wouldn't mind taking a look at the code of conduct just to make sure there's no regulatory changes that were missing since the last update.
Right. Okay.
Thank you. You can give any of those to me and we'll run it through the committee.
I'm glad you say policy, because I have this big star next to shared decision-making, that piece, so.
Yeah. And the code of conduct probably ought to go to policy committee every 3 years anyway, just.
Yeah. All right.
All right.
Yes.
That one in Article 8, again, parents should be parents/guardians. Article 10, same thing. And then we're under on the last page where it says review, again, parents/guardians. And then hearing, same thing, parents/guardians.
Nikki, are you gonna give me your sheet?
I will.
Perfect, okay.
Is that it for that one? It is.
5312.
Nurlan has recommended that we bring this to policy committee. There's a number of proposed changes just to keep up to date with current practice.
All right. 5312.1.
Same with this one.
We're on the same pages. I got these dog-eared, these last two. 5312.2, that one?
In the, no, we're not recommending that,
Okay.
except in the title, the word "n" is misspelled. It should be "in," I-N.
Oh,
I think that was a board docs thing, Karen.
yeah.
It was.
Otherwise, that one is fine, unless other people know.
I think there were a lot of board docs things. All right. 5313.3.
Fifth paragraph down, it says parental consent, and it should be parent/guardian consent.
Doesn't parental, though, as an adjective, doesn't that cover
Oh.
anyone acting in a parental role? Do you need to have guardian in that?
No, I think you're right then. Yeah, okay, that's fine.
Because it's a descriptor. A guardian isn't a parental role. I don't know, George, what do you think?
I'm going to make a suggestion that we consider, instead of the parent/guardian, and it becomes kind of awkward, what about custodian? What if at the beginning of or in the policy somewhere, you simply define that wherever used here in the word custodian shall be deemed to mean the parent or guardian of the student? You could then use custodial here instead of parental. I mean, just because it's always an awkward,
Yeah.
it's-
Any thoughts?
Or that may be something for policy
You like
committee to think
custodial?
about, just as a way of streamlining it, or,
Will that be confused with custodial services? I mean,
Can be confusing to some, yeah. Because
I mean, that's just the only word I came up with at the moment, but I'm just.
Oh,
Well, how about for the time being, we keep
I don't know.
parent, guardian, and if someone comes up with a better,
What are we doing?
I'm sorry, Karen. Some people are concerned about custodial being confusing, so we're suggesting keeping the parent guardian thing going, unless we can come up with something that is more appropriate.
Put it on the back burner and think about
Yep.
that.
Okay, so everybody be thinking about that.
In this case, the sentence that Nikki just pointed out, are we comfortable leaving it as parental? Or do you want to make a change?
I'm okay with that.
All right, so we'll leave that as is
This
then.
one's okay then?
I think
Yes.
parental is
Yeah.
generic, in that sense.
in the previous paragraph, would it sound better if it said, a student of compulsory attendance age will be offered an alternative means of instruction, as opposed to will be offered alternative instruction?
Actually, I think means doesn't fit there. I mean,
No.
you're talking about a program rather than the device that delivers the program. The means would be the device that, in my thinking, the device that delivers the program. Device in a very generic way. Okay.
Norlan, did you want to?
Just aligns with everything else too, so that's why. And all of the other documents saying that.
I'm going to remind everybody to please speak up into those microphones because they're not hearing us on the stream.
Thank you. Thanks for the reminder. I suggested it because it just aligns with everything else. Because what I try to do is not only to read this for readability, but also to make sure that everything else that we have aligns. But either way, I'm fine.
Okay, so what's our decision? An alternative means of instruction or just leaving it as is? Nobody cares.
I think leave it as is for now.
I'm kind of with that. All right.
Can I just ask, though, do people really go to anger management still?
I can't hear you.
I'm sorry. I was asking if, it says, people may participate in counseling or specialized classes such as anger management. Do people go to anger management?
I I would say that's a descriptor of such classes.
It's one of the interventions, you could say, because when a student is long-term suspended, sometimes depending on the issue, if it's dealing with anger, we will say that the social worker who's working with that student will provide some support in terms of management of anger. So, it's an intervention, it's one of those interventions.
Wonderful, thank you.
So the way I'm reading it, it's a list of the various interventions depending on the needs of the student.
All right, anything more on 5313.3?
Yeah, Karen, can, you'll fix that one paragraph there with those two words are hanging out?
3?
Yeah.
Yes. That's the only thing, correct? That I got out
I
of
think
this
that's the
one?
only thing we have now.
Okay.
It's all good, it's all good. All right, 5314.
In the second paragraph, Nerlon suggests we might add the superintendent or designee shall investigate the complaint.
That would be
To
consistent with
comply
other
with
places.
what's happening.
That's consistent throughout our policy
Right,
book.
and that's
That's what
typically
happens
what
anyway.
happens, yeah.
Okay, where are we, Pat?
5314,
Second paragraph.
Under investigation of complaints, Karen,
Okay, what line?
the
Third
third
line,
line, the
second
superintendent or
second paragraph.
designee shall investigate. Feel like I'm at the Senate hearings.
say, pull
Yes,
pull that
Senator.
microphone right, yeah. Well, speaking of those hearings, up here at the front, well, I'm starting to feel like Mike Pence because there's a fly that just keeps flying around here.
So that's minor as well, correct?
The fly, yes.
No, not if I get them first.
I'm sorry, couldn't resist that. Yes, it's minor, Karen. All right. Are we finished with 5314? We can go to 5314-R.
There's been a change in the definition, the way corporal punishment is defined. This may need to go to committee.
All right.
Any act of physical force upon a student for the purpose of punishing that student. So that's a complete rewording of that
Okay.
definition.
All
Go to
right.
policy.
Okay. So we'll send that back to policy then. All right. 5320. George sent us a suggestion about adding on the fourth paragraph down, if a child does not conduct herself properly on a bus or while waiting for or departing from a bus, was his addition, and I like that a lot.
Can we do a second read on that one?
You want to go to second read on
Yeah.
this one? That's fine.
Just so I can see it all together.
Yep.
And there's a space in the first paragraph, Karen, after the word safety, comma.
Thank you.
All right. 5330.
Nerlon has a few changes to propose. I think this needs to go to policy.
All right. Policy.
Just updates around how we handle electronic devices and things like that. And
Well, the
Jo-
other thing was comparison to another 5311.6, because there's some stuff about lockers in both of them that we should make sure that they are saying the same three.
Consistent.
Mm-hmm.
George, we had a question about the personal electronic devices. It still calls, the policy right now calls for confiscating. Is that still allowable?
Well, confiscating in the sense of taking it away and keeping it, no, you can't keep their property, but I think that you can store it. But you have to, you're responsible for it once you take it, so there's a responsibility and liability. And I'm not aware that you can't remove it from them temporarily as long as you store it safely and return it to them at the end of the day. You can't take it and say, I'm going to keep this till your parents come in.
Oh, you
Should be
can't.
able to, but you can't.
Can't.
You can't, really.
What about,
Phones have so much personal information on them that they become like an alter ego to somebody. It's very difficult.
so, Nerland, you underlined, the teachers and administrators are permitted to look at the screen and can request the student's cooperation to search the device further. Are you questioning whether that's allowable?
Yeah, because I remember there was a case, not in New York State, but in another state where an administrator confiscated or took a student's cell phone and started looking through the cell phone, and there were things on the cell phone where he was charged with of possessing. And so that's why I think we want to look at this a little bit more closely. And I want to see if NISBA has any updated policy
I'll
on
look
that
into
too.
it and get
Just
a
a-
memo to you.
All right, and we'll check NISBA's updates too. I don't recall anything recently, but we can check that.
All right. So do we want to send the regulation 5330-R.1 with it?
Yeah, we didn't have any questions there, but,
Okay.
It's a really awkward sentence in that first paragraph. Or, sorry, are we on R or R.1?
I think we're on R.1.
Yeah. Observing a student leaving a room together with finding a smoldering cigarette in an otherwise empty room would seem to support such a reasonable individualized suspicion.
Yeah, well, I suggested taking the seem to out, but I agree that it's an awkward sentence. It's trying to give an example of linking a demonstrable fact with, you know, a conclusion that supports, you know, reasonable suspicion.
I was just questioning whether or not it's needed.
And it could be rewritten to a better, is that what you're suggesting, policy?
Yeah, or does it need to?
That's a good one for policy.
I was just, I understand what you're trying to say,
There
but
you
I
go.
think you need some, because it's a regulation, you need some kind of detail, so send that to
Okay.
policy. That was why I said, should we send that with it? All right,
Do you want to send R2 as well?
yes, so that they're consistent with any changes from the 5330 right on through. So R2 will go to policy as well.
Did any of the board members have any questions with R2? Because Nerland did not.
I just had another his, her, but that was it in it, so.
Sorry?
I had a his, her in
Okay.
R2, but I can point it out to him when it goes to policy.
Spacing issue.
Yeah. I think some of those were sent to Karen, but, also has 5330-E1 as an exhibit, the acknowledgement of the student parking lots. And the E2. So maybe those should go with it, just to make sure there's consistency. Okay, so those all go to policy as well. Sorry, policy.
No problem, we like this. We'll give it to James since he's gone.
Yeah, I'm there with you, so. This brings us to the next hunk of them. So on that first portion, anything on the last few that we just did that's going to policy? Anything that anybody's concerned with that they need to be aware of? All right, so let's move on to 5400. 5405. Spacing in that one. 5405-R. 5406. 5406-R. 5420.
Just the comma that needs to be taken out. From the first bullet, just the comma, after of or recruitment of students, without the comma.
Nerland, where are you?
I'm on
54
5406R, the first bullet, just a comma, just remove the
I'm sorry,
comma.
Where are you?
At the end,
5406R?
Correct.
Okay, and
Where it says, or recruitment of, and there's a comma before students, just remove the comma.
There's an extra comma.
Oh, yeah.
My question on this was, I couldn't find one naturally because I was looking, but I know some of the policies refer to the nurse's office, and then this, at least I'm pretty sure they do, and then this one keeps referring to the health office. And
He's
I-
on 5420 now.
Oh,
We're gonna have to bring this one to policy. There's a number of changes with homeless students.
And there's additional language about homeless due to COVID, so we want to make sure we incorporate all of those.
And you have George's comment that he was looking to see about the consistency between health office and nurse's office.
Yep.
So
Or
that's
Mercer's
something-
office, if you take it the way I typed it.
Yeah, well, you know.
Yeah, there's a lot of changes with this one. NISBA has a couple of changes that they are proposing, and I like those changes because it aligns with some of our practices, so we want to make sure to take it back.
So I would probably recommend that we send 5420-R with it. And also that George mentioned something about ambulance calls and fees that might be associated. You know how when you call and then the ambulance comes and then you get charged for the ambulance ride? That's something we should look at and hear how it affects, who's paying that is basically what it comes down to.
I do have a question.
Sure.
It says school nurse in here. Is that, I don't know the consistency across the board if it's always school nurse, or do we, I know we officially call them the school nurse teacher in our district, but I wasn't sure. I couldn't find anything else because it just says school nurse. And I always, other things that I see like on the sites and stuff, I always see school nurse teacher.
There's actually a distinction between the school nurse and the school nurse teacher in terms of certification.
All of our buildings have school nurse teachers. The high school has a school nurse teacher and a registered nurse. But aside from that, all of our other buildings have school nurse teachers.
Right, so for our intents and purposes, those two terms are interchangeable.
Interchangeable,
Because
okay.
our school nurse is a school nurse teacher.
Okay, I'm fine with it. I just had that question written down.
Sure.
So, thank you.
Did you say you wanted to bring this to policy, Diane?
Yes,
5420R?
yes.
Yeah.
Nurlan, that's one that you said you might have additional changes because you wanted
Correct.
to review it?
Both 5420 and 5420
Okay,
are.
our
They're kinda
meeting
like
is,
those
our meeting's November 6th, so I'll need those changes.
Not a problem. I already have the written document. That's why I was proposing that they go to policy.
All right. 5431. 5431-R. Whoop, whoop.
Sorry. Nurlan, would you like to explain your question about mental health professional and the nurse?
The only reason why I'm proposing to remove school nurse teachers out of that, because when you're talking about crisis intervention and the mental health team, although sometimes the nurses will be involved in a group meeting because they understand the student medical aspect, they're not mental health professionals. Just like we wouldn't want a social worker to call themselves a school nurse teacher, just like we wouldn't want a school nurse teacher to be called a mental health professional. Suicide and crisis intervention, most of the time the people who are directly are going to be involved with those are the mental health professionals, including, if we're talking about mental health professionals are the counselors, the social workers, the psychologists.
But wouldn't they be involved in a crisis situation?
To some extent,
So-
not as much as the mental, right, the way this sentence is reading, it looks like it's including the school nurse teachers as mental health professionals.
So,
But shouldn't they be kept into it, especially if like there's medication or something needed? Shouldn't they be in the loop as well?
Right, it's not that they're not in the loop, they are involved, and I think that was the reason why they were included at first. But when you're reading the sentence in terms of mental health professionals, it makes it sound like the school nurse teachers are also mental health professionals.
It lists the mental health professionals.
It doesn't mean that they're not involved, just like they are involved with behavioral achievement team, depending on the need of that child.
so is there another way to rewrite that paragraph that would
Yeah.
include school nurse teachers without listing them as part of the mental health?
Correct, because right now, the way the sentence read, it looks like they are mental health professionals, and they are the medical professionals, not
I
mental
would
health.
hate to exclude the nurse from,
So let's send this to policy, so that can be rewritten.
Yeah, because they are part of the team.
we can rework
Yet
that
they're not
paragraph.
mental health professionals.
All right.
Maybe mental and
5431,
medical health professionals. Yeah.
Are we good down there with, for sending that to policy down there?
Yeah.
Okay. 5431-R.
I would bring that one too, because it mentions the
goes
school
along.
nurse teacher, and they kind of go together.
Yeah.
And then George had,
Yeah,
In
on the
addition-
question of referral, including suicidal ideation as a reason for a referral rather than, because
so
they're
it's not
both
just the
separately
behavior,
identified.
but the expression. So that would be, Pat, under referral process for staff, the first sentence there, staff members who become aware of suicidal behavior or suicidal ideation in a student. So when you take that back to policy, they can look at that too.
Yep, thank you.
All right. There's an exhibit attached to it. I don't think it really needs anything, but. All right. Brings us to 5432.
Diane, was 5431, was the exhibit going with the policy or not?
Yes.
It is?
Yes.
Okay, so it's
My
going.
apologies.
It's going back to policy committee?
Yep.
Okay,
They're all together.
okay.
All right, so 5432, nobody said. 5450.1.
There's a shall in there that can probably be changed to a will. And the second to last line.
Okay. That does not need to come back. The fly.
The fly, sorry.
5455. Oh, I wrote myself a note with this little face with like a, this really fits today's times.
With the second paragraph, just a space between of and a. The Board of Education further recognizes the importance of a, so there needs a space.
All right. 5460.
This one we might want to bring back. We want to update the requirements around training and some of the things that have changed. It's more than just minor changes.
And George made the suggestion, I don't know if you got that, mandatory reporting of deaths. Any child official taking child out of there, any official or employee. It's under mandatory reporting of deaths. The first line underneath that heading,
Any official?
you just take child off.
Yeah.
Small policies looking at it. So you might as well then probably take 5460-R with it.
That's going to policy as well?
Yeah. Sorry, I like to make sure the policy and the regulation really sync up. So I'm just,
Thank you.
all right, Pat, so we're gonna send 5460-R to policy as well, okay. 5465,
There's several shalls that could be wills.
okay.
And under training, the superintendent or designee will be responsible.
Okay. Anybody else have anything on that one? 5465-R.
Again, a whole bunch of wills, shalls that could be wills.
George had a suggestion.
Yeah, the last paragraph on the bottom of the page there, it says, where it has the parentheses, assuming that the parent or person is not the person who originally reported. I would suggest it might read better that unless the person or the parent or person is the one who originally reported the incident, is the person who reported it.
Yeah.
It's a little more horrible.
Everybody good with that suggestion of George's? All right. Doesn't need to come back because it doesn't change the meaning.
Minor, Diane?
Minor, yeah. All right. We have the exhibit .1. Which also has the page with the child abuse in an educational setting definitions. And we have exhibit .2. I actually made a note, because down in the middle it says state law also requires that I apprise you, blah, 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 and I've attached a copy of the 4-page summary of the reporting requirements. It's not in this, but I'm assuming it's somewhere under the 5465-E.2.
Could you repeat the question? I'm sorry.
Yeah, in the middle there it says state law also requires I apprise you of the procedures, and then the next sentence it says I've attached a copy of a 4-page summary of the reporting requirements with details these responsibilities. Is that located somewhere, or?
Nurlan, where would you find that 4-page summary?
I don't know, actually. Well,
It actually used to physically be in the manual book.
Okay.
Was that one of those things we took out? Or didn't we take out a bunch of forms?
Could be, I just kind of read it and I go,
I think it's good to take a look at that deeper. So
Okay.
I would want to take a look into that.
Okay, so you want me to pull it for policy so you can look at it
Yes.
deeper? Okay.
Yeah.
I don't care as long as like, somebody already asked me that, I wouldn't know what to tell them besides go talk to Nurlan. Okay, so we'll send that to policy.
But E1 was okay?
E1 seemed to be okay.
Okay.
5470.
There's some wills and some his and hers in there.
All right. Those are minor. 5500.
George, is this one that you
ER.
could take a look at in terms of any changes to FERPA since the last?
What? My question was, when you got down, it was in the regulation portion under section 13, where it seemed to confuse CSE records with other records.
Was there anything in this that you thought was outdated or needed to be updated?
I didn't see anything that I thought was outdated.
In 5500, I just noticed that there needs to be a space under student directory information, 4th line down, after the period after attended.
Yep.
Parents.
Gotcha, thank you.
We're just everywhere. All right, so 5500-R. Section 13 was George's question.
Doesn't this jumble in, because it talks about records being maintained by the CSE, and then you're talking about the health office and then the school counselor's office, the way it's set up anyway, it seems confusing to me.
What's confusing? What's confusing?
Well, are they, is that right? I mean, the way it reads, the following student records are maintained by the Committee on Special Education, and then talking about a number of records that are maintained in the health office and the school counselor's office. Does that seem correct, the way to say that the Committee on Special Education is maintaining those records?
It's hard to hear from here.
So his question is under section 13,
Okay.
and it says maintaining a list of types and locations of records. And then it says the following student records are maintained by the Committee on Special Ed, and then it lists them. And the question is that really what's happening? Is special ed is maintaining those? Is it confusing?
For those who are in out-of-district programs? Because it looks like that's what it's talking about. Those are for the students who are in out-of-district programs.
No.
Well, what we can do, I think
I
it's.
think the question is, why would the CSE be maintaining records in the counseling office or in the nurse's office? It's just an awkward wording. You see that?
Are we in the second which paragraph
Are
are
you
we
on
in?
section 13?
Sections 13, number 1, is that what we're talking about?
Well, I think the confusing line is the following student records are maintained by the Committee on Special Education.
That should probably just
Yeah,
be
it would-
maintained, it should just say that maintained by the district. Or the school, right.
How about this, since there's questions about it, let me just double check with my teammates on that, those pieces.
So we'll send it back to
'Cause,
policy.
yeah, I want to read it over and double check with my special ed teammates,
So we'll send this to,
or clarify.
we'll send this to policy till you get some clarification on it.
Awesome.
All right. Oh, I gotta wait a minute, signal.
Thank you.
Sure. Just waiting for Pat. $5,500-E.1, that's the notification under FERPA. Does that look good? Okay. $5,500-E.2,
Diane, E1 was okay then?
yes.
Okay.
The word in accordance was cut short.
We're not up to that one yet, are we? Are you on 5500E.2?
Yes.
Yes.
Where are you on? Was that the one you were on?
She's on the next one.
Okay, I'm on the 50s, I moved on.
Is E2 okay?
Sorry.
Yeah, nobody said anything, so I was just getting ready to say 5660.
They know that?
Yes.
They miss it? We are changing that.
Is that where you
In
had?
accordance, yes, instead of in accord.
In 50.
I
In the
think
first
that's what they
paragraph, it
meant.
says
Oh,
in
yeah.
accord.
E1.
That was also one that George
The
made a
students.
suggestion of
Top
adding or
right.
substituting into
dear
the sale of
parent, guardian,
tickets
or
to a
student.
social, musical,
At the end of the sentence?
theatrical, or athletic event.
Yep.
Theatrical was the word to be added. That first bullet. Everybody good with that? Okay. That's minor. All right.
Are we adding or are we substituting for musical?
Adding.
Yeah, I could go either way, but in this district, musical is big, so.
Yeah.
5680.
So this one, the board may want to send a policy because there might be some bias in there in terms of our policy about charging people for items.
Okay. We'll send that to policy as I'm getting that smile from their lawn.
Yes.
All right. That's important.
and
It's important.
inclusion.
It's one of our priorities to look at that.
That's right. Plus, it's the board goals.
5,800. 5,800 dash R.1. 5,800 dash R.2. Okay. 2/3 of the way there, folks. We're headed down the fiscal aisle, Andy. All right.
Never much changes there.
Everybody ready? 6,100. 6,110. George.
Just a typo in
Yep.
the first paragraph.
Yep.
Assist in its development, everyone get that?
Pat, I'm sorry, can't hear you. Where are you?
First paragraph of 6110, second to last line, assist in its development instead of any.
Got it, thank you.
That looks like a board docs problem.
That was a board docs.
All right, 6110-R. 6110E.1. E.2. 6113. 6130. 6135. 61, oh, no, okay.
I said his are easier.
Yeah. 6135-R. George had a recommendation of
Together,
together that
I don't
second
think it
to the
belongs
last
there.
paragraph there, the last sentence. Increase in spending and determining, take out the word together, the contingency budget. All right. Okay. 6135-E.
I just had a question.
Sure.
Should PTA be PTO meetings?
Yeah. I don't think we have any PTAs left anymore.
it is
They're all
PTO. Yes.
For a while, we still had PTAs. But yeah, that should be PTO. That's minor, yeah.
Is that minor?
We all know what that means. 6150. 6200.
There's just a duplication of the phrase, is authorized to borrow money by revenue or tax anticipation. No, it's just in there twice. That's all.
Yeah.
All right. Everybody's got that? Okay. 6215. 6231. 6240. 6240-E. 6245. 6254. 6300. 6410. 6500. 6600. 6600-R. 6610. 6610-R. 6630. That was a nice short one. I like that one.
Now, don't feel bad, Andy. Nobody wants to deal with your policy. That's right.
Thank goodness.
I think we should just heckle Andy. I mean, we just heckle you.
Yeah. That's okay.
6640. 6645. We
typo.
got that separation of May and B. Is that what you
Yeah.
had, George? Yep,
I
okay.
tried to call my high school teacher about that, but it turns out she died 40 years ago. But I looked it up, and seems to be right.
6650. 6670. 6680. 6690. Oh.
I have a question.
Okay, we got questions.
I have a question.
I got one down here too, so. Go ahead, Jennifer.
Just joking.
Oh, I'm gonna hurt you. Do you have a question,
Nope,
Nikki?
I am good.
Yay!
Student management always gets the prize.
Yeah.
Well, you know, that's where some of our deep priorities are right now, not the fiscalism. Shoosh. Believe it or not, I believe this brings us to the superintendent's report.
So I'm going to be fairly brief in my comments. There were 2 items submitted as written reports, the extra activities report and the Fall Leadership Summit report. Are there any questions on either of those items? Okay, as far as oral information goes, just a couple things. We're really continuing to refine our programs. Both of the models that we're implementing this year, as you heard from the principals, are new. And we've had some growing pains in terms of their implementation. But I think that the teachers are doing a good job adapting. I think the administrators have done a truly commendable job as well. And we're just focused on getting better in terms of our implementation. I think that the survey that we put out to parents last week will close at the end of this week. Will give us some valuable feedback in terms of what we need to focus on as we move deeper into fall, as far as, you know, what works for their children, what doesn't. Also, you know, we genuinely want to make sure that we're doing a good job as far as customer service goes. So I think that information will truly be helpful. Last weekend was the first weekend of fall athletic competition, and it went very smoothly. And just, I'm not sure if you're aware, but we are live streaming all of our athletic events. So that gives folks an opportunity, because we do have to limit spectators at those events, but it gives folks an opportunity to tune in. So we did get some really positive feedback about that. And other than that, just working through issues as they arise. This is new for all of us, and you know, we've been in a situation since the pandemic started where we've had to play jazz, we've had to do a lot of improvising, but I think generally speaking, folks have done a really good job of that. Comments, questions?
They've done an amazing job, not just a good job, an amazing job.
Yeah, I always say we don't always get it right, but we are working really hard to get it right.
Right.
And doing a lot of good things, but know that we still have some things that we need to improve. That concludes the superintendent's report.
Nice. Brings us to old business. We had some revisions that we needed to make to our board workshops and our legislative positions. You saw that they were minor changes, but I still like to approve them as they sit now with their revisions. So I'll take a motion to approve the workshops. Jennifer and Anne Marie. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. And then our legislative positions, I'll take a motion for that. Jennifer and Nikki, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. This brings us to board member reports. First up is the Monroe County School Board Information Exchange.
It was on reflections of virtual learning. So there were 3 school districts with 4 presenters that talked about what it took for them to start up the virtual learning this year. And they said that the assistant superintendents for instruction met weekly so they can learn from one another. They talked about what was successful for them, some of the challenges that some of the districts faced, such as not being in the position maybe that we are with the one-on-one technology. Like we heard from Dina before, it took, some of the people haven't received their computers yet because obviously of all the COVID things. And they said they're continuing to learn. And then the big thing that they focused on too was the social emotional learning. And they said that was a heavy focus, especially for the remote learners. But the biggest thing about the information exchange meeting is that tomorrow Diane Nguyen is presenting. Are you presenting too?
No, but this year I felt that it was necessary for us to start branding ourselves, since there's a lot of districts that come to the table and present things, and I think we have great stuff to offer. So tomorrow I volunteered us to do a topic on reopening with equity in mind, and then in January we're going to do something on ENL. So,
And that was
yes.
my favorite part of the meeting, by the way, was Nerlon spoke up. She's like, listen, RH wants to be a part of it. I have people for this. And they actually rearranged the schedule. So good for you, and I'm very happy. So we'll get to hear Diane speak tomorrow, which is great. And that was it.
Great. Thanks. Next up is the Equity and Inclusion Committee. Both May and I sit on that. It was a great meeting. The meeting was open with some opening thoughts and the importance of our work with the superintendent speaking. Then we reconnected with the group. We have some new people in the group. There's been a little bit of a shift, so it was good to sit back and talk about the purpose of the steering committee and just having a nice circle with some conversation. We did an introduction to the New York State Culturally Responsive Sustaining Framework, and then we tried to go into breakout sessions. Some of us couldn't get into our break. There was some technical difficulties that night as we were doing this meeting remotely. So I don't know, I just ended up staying where I was because I couldn't get into the one, no matter what I tried, and I wasn't the only one. Then we had some debriefing with Pat, and then we meet again on the 21st, which is next week already. And May, you have anything to add to that?
I think you got it.
Yeah. All right. It's really great it's just such a great group and all the different thoughts and the energy.
And 38 people were in attendance.
How many?
38.
Yeah. So we were.
Yeah.
It was a record attendance.
Yeah.
Yep.
We kind of had a little dip, but some of it too is, the pandemic didn't help some of that, but it's the energy, the desire to do better, to do more was just, it was very exciting. Next up is Mpac.
We had our first meeting. It was very well attended, and that makes me and Nerlan happy. There were old members and new members and some district staff. The meeting, we started with individuals reporting their impression of or experience with the opening of schools, whether they're hybrid or fully remote, and everyone had very positive things to say. What stood out is they all agreed it's 100% improvement from their experience in the spring, we were glad to hear that. We had the Director of Wellness and Equity, Ms. Diane Nguyen. She came and presented the summary of the mental health survey that she's done in August and what the steps they're taking to address the issues that brought up in the survey. Members also asked about how we're trying to remove barriers so everyone can participate in terms of translating the survey next time we do them, and Nerland is going to follow up on that. So it was a great meeting.
Thank you. Next was the Henrietta Youth Asset Team meeting.
I didn't meet up with them.
Okay, no problem. Not sure how, some of them are, they meeting by Zoom and,
I wasn't sure, did not touch base with Anita, so I have to touch base with her.
it's all right. Thank you. Labor Relations.
That's me.
Okay.
I went on because of James. James wasn't able to go, so Pat and I attended. We had two presenters from Honeywell Falls Lima School District, and they reviewed the requirements. The topic was the developing scenarios based emergency response drills. They reviewed the requirements, the timing of the safety drills, what type. Their goal is to not only prepare students and staff, to give them the tools to adapt during emergencies, because you cannot prepare for every emergency. So they try and, their overall goal is for them to give the students and the staff tools. And he mentioned something like, we prepare students even after they graduate, they have these life skills to take with them. They talked about the different types of emergencies and how they modify their trainings and their drills to accommodate students with different needs, which I found that's very nice to hear. They talked about that the plans need to be updated, and they stressed the importance of using communication devices during drills to make sure that everyone is on the same page. What else? The plans need to be updated and maintained, and they mentioned how they debrief after the drills and they get feedback from students, and how they incorporate some of the feedback in their training and their plans. And we actually got a shout out, I think. Rush-Henrietta was mentioned.
Pardon?
He mentioned how the next step for them is to do something, and how Rush-Henrietta actually is the only school district is doing that.
Yeah, he complimented on us in general on being really at the forefront with a lot of the emergency response things.
Yes.
I thought it was interesting too that they emphasized, the importance of making sure we thoroughly drill for both cohorts in the hybrid, now that we have kids coming in different days of the week.
And we are doing that, just so you know. And even for the RLA, some of the district safety procedures, we're doing videos to send to the RLA students so they get the same thing.
Good, they don't get rusty then.
Yeah.
And that's it? Okay. That's it. District Safety Committee.
All right, this is going to be long, but I'll talk fast. So I knew that Nerland was involved right away because we started out with a community circle, and I knew that was really, and it was a great thing because everyone was on the same page. They said that the opening was really smooth overall. All the students, like we heard from the principals, were doing really great, following all the protocols, and there was a lot of great teamwork by everyone, which is really nice to hear. Ken Nelson said that all three main offices are complete and they're almost done with the parking lot and building light upgrades. Each building, as we know, we've heard a lot of times, but just so everyone hears it, each building's deep cleaned each night. And every meeting I've been to has been a kudos to Andy's department for the fantastic job they've been doing. And it doesn't matter what meeting I've been to, I keep hearing that over and over, so I'm saying it directly to you so that you know that was a big shout out to you many, many times, you and your department. Geraldo said that he wanted to remind people that you can't bring for the teachers. In particular, you can't have potlucks like you might have been able to do before. If you bring food, I think he's mentioned this before, you have to have it in single-serve food packages right now, obviously for COVID. And that food is still available for the remote learners to be picked up at the high school. Free breakfast and lunch, as we heard, is going on through December, and he says he thinks it's likely to be extended through the end of the year until the funds run out for all students. And then Shirley said the drivers have been trained on how to load and unload students safely, which I thought was a nice thing to hear too, considering things have changed a little bit. And they've also been trained on how to use foggers to sanitize the buses, and they all have appropriate PPE. And there are 38 students that had medical allowances regarding masking. However, almost all of them wear them anyway, which is also nice to hear. And each bus is cleaned after every run. And Bonnie said that the food pantry is hopefully going to open this year. However, Food Link hasn't been able to come in and do the inspection. So they haven't been able to do that quite yet. And they still have some food left in the backpack program if anyone knows any students or family that need that. And then Mike Palladino said that there's 12 AEDs that have been updated over the summer. There was 12,600 stickers placed on the floors and the walls, and I know that Bo had sent that out before, and we're obviously seeing it as we're coming to this school. And over 2,000 posters hung regarding hand washing and masking. So there was a lot of work that they kept referring back to your team and how great everyone was. And then I think the other big things were the Captain Fay said they began a pilot program with the town. They're putting on an extra patrol 4 days a week to maybe help with some of the issues they have, especially with the stuff around the schools. And that Safety Week, well, it's happened now, but at that time, Mike Dinsmore had asked about doing the safety drills and stuff. He was concerned about that, and they're obviously being done, and not only are they being done, and some things have to be adjusted a little bit, but they're being done twice because of the 2 cohorts, and as Nalan just said, they're being sent out to the remote learning students too, just in case they're come back during the year, which is why we're ahead of a lot of districts, right? I know, I love our safety, we do so great. And I think that was it for our safety committee. I think that's absolutely it.
Are you district wellness as well?
I am.
Well, you can keep right on going.
I know, I've been very busy. So a lot of that will be redundant, so I'll just say that one of the women had spoke and she said that opiate use is up again, and I found this very interesting, but it made a lot of sense when she said it. Due to COVID, people weren't able to go to their regular meetings in person, so virtual doesn't necessarily work for everyone, which has caused an increase, plus the stress, obviously, of COVID. So I found that to be interesting, and suicides are also up, obviously for some of the same reasons. And that what I found interesting too was she said the most stressed group isn't the age group that I would have thought it was. It's 16 to 25-year-olds. They said they have the hardest time because they don't have the ability to come in contact with people as much. So I was kind of a little surprised by that. I thought it would have been the elderly, but. And then Diane shared that there were mental health surveys sent out during the summer, and they had a large response from students, parents, and staff, and they're using that data to work with the principals and developing tiered supports for those who need it. And they're working closely with the Remote Learning Academy on what signs teachers should look for in students regarding mental health. And that they have offered all staff supports with Healing Connection, and there's 3 hours blocked off for staff if they need to, so they don't have to be placed on a waiting list, and have offered 4 weeks of self-care for staff or any district member, and there have been 67 staff members who have signed up, all the way from administrators, clerical, teachers, and food service workers. And that was it. It was a very nice meeting.
Been busy.
Yes.
Next is the Monroe County School Board Legislative Committee, which I attended. It was a good meeting. We had some legislative updates. Tom Nespeka was there, and he reported about the Area 2 Virtual Resolutions Committee meeting. And some of the resolutions that the group said that they, even though most of us said they would support, they decided they would not support because they related to special education, because members thought they added additional burdens to parents, and some other things about the tenure, 5-year renewable tenure process. They did not want to support that. I did send you all the minutes from that meeting, so you can read that in a little more detail. Some position papers were approved, and probably the most important piece from that meeting is that our next meeting in November, our local regents will be there to visit, so we worked on questions and topics that we wanted to address with them. We only have about an hour, so we've got to be concise with what we want to ask them. And those topics are in the minutes for you to look at. If there's anything else that you would want to ask the regents, let me know, and I will forward that on to the committee chairs. All right, so that was legislative. Obviously, there's not going to be any traveling to do any, and out to Albany this year. That's all put off. Well, let's see, the next one is the executive committee meeting, which Bo and I both attended. It was a great turnout, I thought, for the evening. You know, the president gave a report and the executive director gave their report. I also forwarded those minutes to you as well. They reviewed last year's goals from the outgoing president because we didn't really have the end of the year meetings like we normally had. The new president shared her goals for the year, which are also in the minutes. And there were some regional reports. One of them that I found interesting, I haven't had a chance to go look up, is the Act for Education. That committee set aside their goals for the year, and she noted that they were doing some roundtable discussions about 40 minutes in length to inform the community on topics related to public education. The first one was public school funding. So I want to go back and view that one, and some of the other topics that are coming up are topics on safe practices, remote learning, athletics, facilities, and social emotional learning. So those will be coming out. So look for those to come in the future, but it sounds like they were good conversations. Anything you want to add to that?
No, make sure you tune in on the 29th. I'm part of that one. Remote learning.
All right. Brings us to Mpac. Now, just keep going. We did a virtual meeting. All the parent groups gave their liaison reports. Some have met, some PTOs haven't met yet. They're just getting to that, which is fine. Probably the highlight of the evening was we had guest speakers from operations, facilities, and transportation. So Andy, Geraldo Torres, and Shirley Smith-Gravanda were there, and they did a presentation about the opening of schools and what happened in each of those areas in order to get schools open. And I think the parents really appreciated having that knowledge of how much work really went into it. And then they were able to, now they'll be able to take it back to their parent groups and share, those details. And yes, the push, we have the meals for breakfast and lunch for all students, and if I just read it, it's been extended through the end of the school year. So let's encourage our students to come get their breakfast and come get their lunch. And then the superintendent was there talking about the district priorities and Mpac's priorities, but also letting them know about the parent survey that's open right now. And that was it for Mpac. That brings us to the Henrietta Youth Development Advisory Committee.
Meeting was postponed.
Okay.
'Cause they didn't have enough voting members attending, so they postponed it. I don't know when the next meeting is, though.
Different times trying to get together,
Yeah.
for sure. So, great. This brings us to our recap.
It'll be short and sweet. All action items passed. Our friends in policy did not have much to do, so we decided to send them a bunch of reading. And our next meeting is on October 27th.
All right. Is there anything else for the good of the cause here? Then I will take a motion to adjourn the meeting. May, seconded by Nikki. All in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? Motion carries 5-0.
We were ahead of schedule until policy.